Simon gave his father, Mr. Butler, a lot of trouble. The clubs, the discos, the ever-changing girlfriends. Simon went through all this when he was in his early 20s. It only got worse from that time. The girls in Simon's life were changing so quickly that he did not remember their faces or their names. And many times Mr. Butler caught his son's next beauty shamelessly lying on the bed with bottles of hard liquor and crumpled packets of cigarettes next to her. "How can you behave like this?" scolded Mr. Butler at his son. "You shame not only yourself, but also me." "Dad, I'm all grown up now. I can make my own decisions." "My God, what decisions are you talking about? You don't know how to do anything but drink and hang out with girls. Anyway, here's the deal. A week ago, a granddaughter came to visit my old friend Mr. Cox, a very nice girl. Tomorrow you'll meet her. The girl has only a grandfather. Her father died 2 years ago, and it seems that her stepmother has already found a new husband. You could marry this girl, son. I have already met her, and I assure you she will be a perfect wife." "Should I marry her tomorrow?" sneered Simon, looking at his father. This question pissed Mr. Butler off, and he left his son's apartment, slamming the door loudly. Strangely enough, the dinner together went very well. Simon liked Hannah very much. She behaved simply and naturally, willingly answering questions, asking something herself, and looking at Simon cheerfully with her big black eyes. And he was so amazed at the girl's naturalness, because he was already used to the fake beauty of modern glamorous girls, that he really forgot all his friends for her sake. For a few months they did not part, and then suddenly he got bored. He had achieved everything he wanted and lost interest in Hannah. Simon went back to his friends and continued to live his life this way. One day, Hannah called him and asked to talk to him. At the appointed hour, Simon was walking through the park and saw her from afar. She was standing by the fountain with her back to him, looking like a fragile statue of an antique goddess. The rising breeze was ruffling her white sundress and the soft strands of her knotted hair. Simon came closer, took the girl by the hand and smiled at her. But after a moment, the smile on his face was replaced with fright. Hannah was pale as chalk. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" asked Simon anxiously. "No, I'm fine. But I'm expecting a child from you, Simon, and I want you to know about it." "Hannah, you know we can't get married just because of the baby. In a month we'll just hate each other. I love freedom, and you need a family and a normal husband. I'm not ready for that. Do you understand?" Hannah nodded with her head down and turned even more pale. "Get an abortion, and I'll give you the money for it." Hannah laughed weirdly, turned around and walked away. Simon looked after her leaving, and then went to a club and got drunk, feeling just awful. About 2 weeks later, Simon came home to his parents and saw his father sitting at the table with his head in his hands. Sensing something wrong, the son stepped up to him and asked what had happened. "Mr. Cox has died. It happened a few days ago. He had an argument with his granddaughter. She got pregnant by someone and wouldn't give him his name. He threw her out of the house in anger, then called me. We just started talking about it when I heard him wheezing in the phone. I called an ambulance, went there myself, but it was too late. Mr. Cox had gone. Yesterday there was a funeral." Hearing this, Simon grew cold and asked what happened to Hannah. "I don't know where she is. She wasn't at the funeral. She didn't even come to say goodbye to her grandfather. What a rotten girl. And I was so stupid when I wanted you to marry her. How wrong I was." Simon lowered his eyes but remained silent. After half an hour with his parents, he rushed to look for Hannah, but she was nowhere to be found. A month passed, a second, a third, but Hannah disappeared forever. Since then, Simon began to change. he spent more time with his father, and he could not believe his son's transformation. And Simon fully immersed himself in the family business, and although it was hard for him, very soon became his father's right hand. When Mr. Butler died, Simon took over all the management of his company, and although he took the loss very hard, he did not lose heart and even raised the company to a new level. Now everyone knew Simon as a serious businessman, and there was no business event in town to which he was not invited as a guest of honour. On Christmas Eve, Simon was leaving the office when he was called out by the security guard Nicholas, who had been with the company since its foundation. "Mr. Butler, Merry Christmas." "And to you. How's your wife? Has she been released from the hospital yet?" "Yes, thank you. If it hadn't been for your help, I don't know what would have happened." Simon smiled heartily, and with a friendly pat on the elderly man's shoulder, went on his way. "What a kind man," whispered the guard, looking gratefully in his boss's wake. A few months ago, Simon had literally saved his wife by paying for an expensive medication for her treatment. Out of the office, Simon went to the main square, where there was a huge Christmas tree. This year it was decided to make it a wish tree, and everyone could take part in good deeds and make someone's dreams come true. Simon was also going to take some bright, beautiful cards off the tree. The journalists were already there, and he answered a few questions, and then chose and read on camera a few children's wishes. They were very different, but so naive that it made Simon smile. Oleg asked for a scooter. Artem wanted a ticket to the circus. 7-year-old Taneshka dreamed of an artist's set. One boy asked Santa Claus if he could give his mother a new smartphone. Then she would give him her old one. Suddenly Simon's gaze fell on a dirty little piece of paper torn from a notebook page. All the cards were tied with beautiful ribbons, but this piece of paper was lying low and somehow sideways on the spruce branch, as if someone had tried to attach it but didn't know how to do it. Simon unfolded the piece of paper. In large, childish handwriting, there were only a few words in block letters. "Dear Santa, please find my daddy. Tommy, 5 years old." Simon read these lines several times, and suddenly something strange clicked in his chest. He too could have had a son, but he refused his child, ordering to get rid of him. Simon automatically folded the paper and put it in the pocket of his coat. Then he asked journalists to finish filming and hurried to his car. In the evening, Simon was sitting at a table in a cozy restaurant with his girlfriend Elizabeth, whom he was going to propose to on Christmas Eve. Listening to her cheerful talk about shopping and hanging out with friends, he suddenly took her hand and said quietly, "Elizabeth, give me a baby." The girl looked at him in amazement, then laughed nervously. "Simon, what are you talking?" "Baby, you know about our plans. You've talked about it so many times yourself. Let's live for ourselves. Elizabeth, I want a son. Tommy, for example." Elizabeth's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you kidding me? And what kind of name is Tommy? No way." Elizabeth snorted contemptuously, but noticing that Simon was frowning, she tried to smooth things over. "Of course, I'll give you a baby. Only later. Presently I don't want to ruin my figure. You like that I'm so thin and slim. Imagine me as a round hippo. Isn't that funny? And then all these diapers, babysitters, children's sicknesses." Simon looked strangely at his bride and did not utter another word during the dinner. Elizabeth also resented Simon for having such a stupid idea in his head, and she was not going to give in to him. "Call me a cab," she demanded in a cranky tone. "I have a headache." Simon offered to give her a ride, but she deflected and, with a resentful twitch of her pretty nose, headed for the exit. Simon paid for his dinner and followed her out. and when she drove off, he decided to get some air. He walked for a long time through the city, turning off one street and then another, until he found himself in the square by the very Christmas tree where he had been in the morning. "How can I find you, Tommy?" muttered Simon. "How can I make you more happy?" Suddenly his gaze was caught by some moving heap, flickering hands and feet between the bushes. Looking closer, Simon realized that the boys were fighting there, and he hurried over there. 4 of the boys scattered, while the 5th remained sitting on the ground, wiping his nose and trying to put back the torn sleeve of his old threadbare jacket. The boy was little, but he didn't cry or get frightened when Tommy leaned toward him. "Hey, buddy, are you okay?" The boy nodded, and Simon helped him up and shook off the snow. He took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the child's face. "Now tell the truth. Why did they hit you?" asked Simon. "I just wanted to see whether Santa took my letter or not, and they said I was dirty and would stain the Christmas tree." "Where's your mum?" inquired Simon. "Over there. She's shoveling snow and I'm helping her. She and I are janitors, and we live in that dormitory over there." The funny and very touching kid began to explain eagerly. "Can you tell me what you wrote in the letter?" asked Simon with a smile. "No, I can't, or it won't come true." "Well, let's see together if your letter is there," answered Simon, and took the boy in his arms. He seemed so light that the man was even surprised. "Listen, will your mother scold you for tearing off your sleeve?" asked Simon while carrying the child to the Christmas tree. "No, she doesn't know how to scold. My mother is very kind. Only I don't like when she cries." "Why does your mother cry?" "I don't know," answered the child simply. "She doesn't say. Maybe she hit herself. I sometimes cry if I bump into something. But strangely, my mum cries at night. I sometimes wake up and go to her, and she says I imagined or dreamed it. But I really heard." Simon walked carrying the boy in his arms and thought that the woman must be very unhappy. Maybe she was even a drinker. "So where's your daddy?" "I don't know. Mum said he's been lost for a long time and can't find us." Suddenly the child jumped out of Simon's arms and ran up to the Christmas tree, and then shouted, dancing for joy, "No letter! Hooray! I'm going to have a daddy! My real daddy!" "Wait a minute," Simon told him, startled by a sudden hunch. "You're Tommy, and you asked Santa to find your daddy?" "Yes!" exclaimed the boy, and immediately a woman's voice was heard. "Son, let's go home." Simon turned around slowly at the sound of that voice and froze in amazement. In the light of the lanterns, Hannah was standing in front of him. Simon would never have recognized her in the down scarf, the old quilted jacket, the shapeless pants, and the ridiculous boots. But the voice, it was her voice. Meanwhile, Hannah had already taken her son by the hand and walked away with him, asking him about something. She paid no attention to the man standing next to him. She was interested only in her son. "Hannah," said Simon, unable to stand it, and stepped behind them. "Hannah, it's me, Simon. Don't you recognize me?" The woman flinched as if struck, but stopped and turned around and watched him approaching her. "Hannah, I'm so glad we met. I've been looking for you." "Why?" She stepped back and held Tommy tightly to her. "Well, I wanted to help." "How are you doing, Hannah?" "As you see." "Hannah, why are you so—" Hannah suddenly became angry. "What do you want me to say? That you broke my life? That I regret everything? That I'm unhappy? No, no, and no. But I'm not happy to see you, and so don't keep us. We have to go." "Are you married?" asked Simon, a ridiculous question. She didn't answer. She simply cast him a contemptuous glance, took again the hand of her son, who was standing beside him and understood nothing, and left at a brisk pace. 2 days passed. All that time, Simon was not himself. He could not forget the strange, unexpected meeting with Hannah, could not understand what was troubling her so much. In addition, Elizabeth irritated him terribly, and Simon clearly realized that he did not want to tie his life with her. His thoughts went back to Hannah and her son. He felt that they needed him. Getting into the car, Simon put his hand into his coat pocket and felt something strange there. It was a note from Tommy. The man read it again. Tommy, 5 years old. What a fool I am, he shouted, tearing off the collar and tie that was suffocating him. Is Tommy my son? Why was I so blind? How could I have thought that she would have an abortion? Idiot! Oh, Hannah! Hannah! When Simon arrived home, he could not find his place. Suddenly the doorbell rang and a smiling Elizabeth stood on the doorstep. We broke up so badly. I want to make it up. It's Christmas tomorrow, and I don't want to celebrate it without you. Sorry, Elizabeth, but not tonight. I need to be alone. Ah, I get it. You're preparing a surprise for me. Okay, I'm not arguing. Where shall we meet tomorrow? At the club? Or are you coming to pick me up? No. We're breaking up. I'm in love with another woman. She and I have a son, and they need me. And I need them. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I won't forgive you. You'll come crawling back to me. You'll beg me to forgive you. When Elizabeth was leaving, she shouted something else, but Simon couldn't hear her any more. He was already looking for where to buy a Santa Claus costume. When there was a knock at the dormitory door where Hannah and her son lived, she looked at the time in surprise. 8 p.m. Who could come to them on a festive evening? Tommy, who helped her to set the table, ran to the door, opened it, and gasped. There was a real Santa Claus on the doorstep. He had a big bag with presents in his hands, and the boy's eyes lit up when he saw the toys. Hannah, not understanding anything, stood beside him. Look, we didn't order any presents. You're probably mistaken about something, she muttered, but Santa shook his head. No mistake. Now, Buddy, tell your mother what you wrote in the letter you put on the tree. I asked for my daddy. Here he is, said Simon, and threw off his Santa Claus robe. Hannah and little Tommy were shocked. Forgive me, Hannah. Just don't drive me away. I want to live with you and our son. Is Tommy my son? Hannah nodded, with tears in her eyes. I'm taking you away from here. Now we're going to live together. Hannah, honey, I just now realized how much I love you. Late at night, when happy Tommy, having played with his father, fell asleep, Simon took Hannah's hand and put her beside him on the couch. I'm sad that my father can't see us. He would have been happy. So would my grandfather, replied Hannah. We had a quarrel and I left. I wanted to come back with the baby. I thought he would forgive me, but my grandfather died before he saw his great-grandson. I didn't go to my stepmother. She wouldn't let me in anyway. I heard that her new husband had robbed her of all her money. Now she lives in my grandfather's apartment. I didn't want to kick her out. I decided I could live on my own. I got a job as a janitor. Hannah, forget everything. You'll never be needing again. I won't let you go. You're my happiness, you and Tommy, said Simon, and kissed Hannah. The woman sighed and clung to Simon. She believed that now everything will be all right. And it was true.